All right. Well, good morning, everyone. The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
It's great to be here again today. We had Jim, who takes our notes. He's joining us via Zoom. He's going to be our eyes and ears and let us know how things look and sound via Zoom. So good morning, Jim, and good morning to all of our Zoomies. And we have our roomies here. So we're in both places. And so if we are going to start with a prayer from Martin Luther. This one is a prayer he wrote called For an Increase of Faith. And we'll keep in mind, Luther, when he talks about faith, belief, he's instead of talking about something factual that we're just blindly accepting, he's talking about things that we cling to, that we put our trust in. So let us pray. O Lord, increase our faith. Gladly and truly, I would think of you as my dearly beloved Father and Christ as my brother. But alas, my deeds will not follow. Therefore, help my unbelief so that I may accept your word as truth and glorify your name. O Lord, end our captivity. Redeem us, for we are the firstborn of your new creation. As redemption has been perfectly and sufficiently accomplished through Christ, so may we fully and truly know and accept it. As by your mighty hand the sea was dried up by the parching wind, so let everything of our remaining bondage vanish. Amen.
Amen.
And Bob has a cool slide he showed me that I want to share with everyone. We've been studying God through word history or etymology. So etymology is what we've been doing, word history. And so there's a funny slide here about that. Let's see, it says, the fact that some people can't distinguish between etymology and entomology bugs me in ways I can't put into words. So thank you, Bob.
Really cute.
That is a good one. Yeah, and I love plays on words. Yes.
You need a poster.
That would be great on our classroom wall. No, that would be a good one. All right. So just a very quick review. We've been studying the word God from its very origins, 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. The definitions that we have been working with are that which is called upon or that which is poured out. And especially in Philippians, we get that idea that it's the sense of God pouring out for us, pouring out love for us, for all people. And so from there, we're looking at how has that understanding changed over time with the language. We had talked about how pre-Christians, many times they were talking about God in a universal way, something that is called upon, something larger than themselves. And then about the 1500s, we're looking at the rise of individualism, the Renaissance. You have Martin Luther and the Reformation, the birth or the expansion, the explosion in technology. And so the sense of God starts becoming more personal. We go from that more universal lowercase g to the capital G God, like a name, like any of us, a name, a proper noun is capitalized. So people start talking about God in that sense, more of a proper noun, almost like another person. And so, in our faith, we remind each other that, hey, it's not just personal. God is for everything, for the common good. Yes, individually in our own lives, but then for everyone too. So there's been that change over time from the universal to the more personal that we have now. And then throughout all of that, there's the word good that we touched upon. People would think of God, they would say, oh, there's Good Friday, Okay, that means God Friday. God did something good. So there's the sense of the word God or good is the sense of gathering everything together. So good could be something God does. It's so the two words have two different definitions, but they end up melding together. So we're going to talk, keep talking about that, the work that God does in the world. So for today, I wanted to start with who God says God is. And then, it's interesting too, God, that word started out in the neuter sense, neither male nor female, God. 1500s again, God becoming more personal. It starts taking on he, that all of those things, more of a male persona. But we're going back in the Bible to that neuter sense, God larger than any definition that we might try and place upon God. So in Exodus, we have Exodus 3:13 through 15. This is the story of the call. God calls Moses. God's calling Moses to lead God's people out of Egypt. And, so many of the stories in the Old Testament, when the calling of the prophets, a lot of times they're reluctant. They know what the future might hold in store if they serve as prophets, resistance, hatred, all of those things. And so Moses here in Exodus tries to get out of it 2 times. And he first God says, yes, you're going to be the one to free my people. And Moses responds, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God says, basically God is saying, don't worry, I will be with you. And then Moses, that's not quite good enough. Then Moses says, basically Moses is saying, but who are you? Moses says, if I come to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? What shall I say to them? So Moses is still trying to, well, okay, if you're going to be with me, what is your name? Because with names have power. If you know someone's name, there's more of a connection there. There's the sense that if someone knows your name, there's a sense that someone almost has a power over you or more access to you. How does it feel like when someone uses your name? Or, like you're talking to someone and you can tell they don't remember your name, but yeah, or
Have your identity stolen.
yes, your identity stolen. And that's becoming more common these days. So to know someone's name, to know someone's identity is to have a power over them. And so the biblical scholars I was reading, the commentaries regarding this exchange with Moses, they're saying that God is almost being coy with Moses. And identifying God's self in this way. So Moses says, well, what is your name? What shall I tell the Israelites? God said to Moses, I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the Israelites, I am has sent me to you. The God of your ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my title for all generations. So he just says, I am who I am. That's my name. It's forever. And what's fascinating, if y'all ever have a chance, to delve into a study Bible, there seems to be so much offered in the footnotes. I geek out. I love footnotes because there's so much buried in them. So in this exchange here in the Old Testament, okay, all of this smaller print on both pages, that's all footnotes, trying to expand upon just the little bit of text that's up here between God and Moses. between their conversation. So you have all of this buried in the footnotes, saying that, okay, so what God is saying, the name that God uses is a pun on the divine name Yahweh, and in the present context would seem to connote being there. So God is saying, hey, I'm going to be with you. That's my name. And I wonder what Moses thought of that. But of course, Moses does go on and lead the people out of Egypt. There's also another sense in the footnotes where they talk about God saying, essentially, my title, the name by which I shall be invoked or memorialized. So here we are jumping all the way back to that Pi language. Remember the Proto-Indo-European, that which is invoked, that which is called upon. And so these biblical senses jump back to the original languages. And so there's a little additional commentary here about the type of language that God is using. Let's see. We will delve into a little, just a touch upon Latin. Okay. Idem per idem. So it's a way of speaking that biblical Hebrew and related languages used for gods. So maybe those the Pi language, Sanskrit, Proto-Indo-European, these 6,000 to 8,000 year old languages were already talking about gods. But then we get to the Hebrew people and we're talking about one God, but they're using the same language. Idem per idem, which means same for the same. Same for the same. And, you know, for those who write academic papers, you know, you'll see that in the citations where they'll just, there'll be the abbreviation ID or IBID. And it has that sense of, it's telling you, it's referring you back to the original source. Just go back to where the original source was, or if you see IBID, it means this is the same author that we talked about several chapters ago, but this author is so ever present. We're citing that author all the time. We don't even put their name down anymore. We just say IBID as a shortcut. So with this kind of language, idem per idem, God just saying, I am who I am, God, the original author, God everlasting, God is always here. So people would start using shorthand for God and instead of trying to explain everything back to the beginning. So there becomes a whole new way of using language to talk about God, like a shorthand. And so Latin, same for the same. It's an illustration or example that doesn't add any information because it's not needed. Because God is who God is. God has always been, God always will be. And so so God is so large, God is bigger than all of the categories that we try and place God in. So a whole new language even. And so here, let's see, I am who I am belongs to this category of idem per idem used in biblical Hebrew and related languages to refer to gods. In one way or another, they stress divine freedom, majesty, and mystery. So divine freedom, majesty, and mystery. So those original senses of an all-encompassing God. And then over this millennia and centuries, we've been gravitating towards this more personal view of God. but then as Lutherans, we believe in, through Martin Luther, we believe in the both and. We try and understand or encompass all of it. Yes, God can be divinely free, majestic, and a mystery, and then also personal, both. So just different ways and following the language. And so it says compare. There are other Bible verses that show this idem per idem. There is in chapter 33:19 of Exodus, God says, I show favor to whom I show favor, and I show compassion to whom I show compassion. And this is after the Israelites they had cast the golden calf, the idol, the false god. And Moses had come down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments, got angry and smashed them. And in the middle of all that, God is saying, I will show compassion to whom I show compassion, and I will show favor to whom I show favor. And then Moses, they had the second copy of the 10 Commandments, and God keeps going on with the Israelites, even though they had rebelled. And we had talked about idols as being false gods that people, we try to make in our own image versus remembering that we are made in God's image. So God keeps using this language that God's going to choose what God is going to do, no matter what we do. But we see God opting and erring on the side of compassion and mercy. And then with the prophet Ezekiel, 12:25, this is when Ezekiel is warning Israel. Israel has been conquered by Babylon, and the people are in exile. And God says, I say what I say. And so God, again, through the prophets, is reaching out, letting us know that God is going to choose what God is going to do.
Didn't Martin Luther say he saw God in his cabbage soup?
Something like that. Yes. And yeah, and then the care that people take, someone who sews or cleans, yeah. And so God can be found everywhere. But yeah, I remember something about cabbage soup. So we have this different way of talking. So God saying, I am who I am. And I'm going to just put up a few words for our word history that we'll start, not the insects, but our word history. And I still think it's fascinating how, we can use all these different languages. There's always been this sense of something larger. Let's see. So with God saying, I am who I am, there is the Hebrew Haya, to be. So we're going to touch a little upon being, or the be, to be, but then there's also the I am. And it turns out there's a little different changes in meaning and use there. So we have to be. Here we have one, a big word in our faith, abiding, or to abide. So remain with. Say the if with there. So there's the sense of remaining with. And I think that's the definition we're more accustomed to. Now, going back 6,000 to 8,000 years to the Pi language, they have a definition. I thought this was fascinating. There's the sense from the Proto-Indo-European, there's a sense of trust, confide, and persuading. So someone, someone just kind of being there, influencing, persuading. So there's not that use of force or coercion, but persuading. And also to await trustingly. To await trustingly. So we'll keep all of these senses in mind as we touch upon, we're going to look at when God says in Exodus, I am who I am. There is, so we'll keep these senses in mind. We're being, we're remaining, we're trusting. I take this to mean God. I think of God, influencing us, always there, no matter what we do, always there, God working on us, softening our hearts. So there's this to await, like to await trustingly, like the sense of like God knows at some point things will turn out. It might take a while. It might take eternity. And we'll be touching on that too, on eternity. So God says, I am who I am. So I'll just write that initial sense down. From the pie, first, let's see. Okay, pie, it is very simple to be. So you have am, but it means to be. And it can also mean to remain. So God always with us. And then, let's see, there's the word be as well. I didn't know this until I started researching it. Be used to be used more. These two words, the scholars are saying about in the 1200s, these two words merged in meaning. When we had the word be, when it was used more, and this is from the Pi language in the very beginning, this was more, there was a more active sense, to become, to grow. We talk about faith growing. There once was a more active sense that was emphasized more. And to come to be. So a very active sense. But the scholars are saying about in the 1200s, the sense merged more into this, more of a sense of permanence. Something just is. This more active sense of something becoming and growing became less emphasized in our language. And the historical event that the scholars are tying it to, so is in England, 1066, William the Conqueror brings in the French language, or the precursor to the French language. The people in England were speaking this combination of French, and you had, the influence of the Vikings. You had all of these words kind of morphing and this influencing each other. And that was in 1066. And at the time, these two words were still separate in 1066. But by the 1200s, that Norman or French influence was wearing off. People were starting to speak more of the English that we eventually would recognize. We probably wouldn't recognize a lot of it from then. It was becoming more what we speak today. So the words, these two words, as the influence of French wore off, these two words started morphing and combining, but became more of a sense of permanence versus a verb. And, in many times in church circles now, people will talk about love being a verb, about us going out and showing love, sharing God actively. Because, our society now, people are hungry for that because we've gotten so used to just assuming things are the way they are. But there's still that more active sense of becoming, of being, of growing. So our word history can help us go back to the original meanings for a new day. So that was the 1200s, some of those changes that started. And which leads us to eternity. I know, Pastor Larry, you had brought that up. This last week or the week before, I think, there was this, we look at faith as a change in perspective and how over time our perspectives can change. We see something one day that, yes, something bad happened to us, and then years later we look back on it and maybe we're still not happy that it happened, but we can appreciate what happened or the growth that came from it. And that perspective shift comes with the passage of time. And so we talk about eternity. And as our faith assures us, God has all the time in the world. God doesn't have to worry about time. And so let's touch upon eternity, God's work, what God does in eternity. So eternity. And feel free, any questions or comments as we go forward, please feel free at any time. So we're going to do some Latin and some Pi language, because they both have something to say about what eternity. So the Latin, that's the more recent. This will sound very familiar, I'm sure. So enduring and permanent. Okay, so that's enduring and permanent. And then also of great age. And this doesn't necessarily mean chronological age as aging biologically, but the idea of an age of time, of an era. If anyone listens, Taylor Swift, eras, everything's eras. Of an age, meaning how things are done, society, culture, bigger things. So of great age. So there's a great age. We always look, right, we always want that golden age again. We're always looking for the golden age in history. So of great age. So that's the Latin. The Pi language. I thought this was very interesting. Okay, so here's Pi, Proto-Indo-European, vital force. Vital force. Okay, so we have vital force. We have life, just life, life itself. So we're talking big, big timeless things, life. And there is long life. I thought that was fascinating. Vital force and life itself. What's eternal? What's truly important? What's truly lasting? And so all of that feeds into our understanding of God. So we're calling upon, we're invoking something bigger and timeless and vital that gives life. And then we see in Philippians again, Jesus pours out his life for us. God is pouring out God's life for us. So the eternal. And then, we've talked about some of these changes over the centuries. Sometime around those 13 to 1500s again, there was a lot going on then. the concept of eternity, they started adding to it. It became not just eternity, but eternity in God. So people were looking for life in God. And so we can talk about our faith also addresses, well, what is life in God like? And the good news there, with our life in God, we're already in that life. When we hear eternity, perhaps there's that idea, oh, that's after we die. But it turns out eternity's more than that. Eternity's already right now, right now and after we die. And so what does eternity in God look like already? What can life in God look like right now already? And so for that, I turned to Galatians 5:22-23, the fruit of the Spirit. So this is living in God and what that is like. So imagine that this can start right now. We don't have to wait till we die. It can start right now. So that would be the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience. And the more I read this list, the more I'm glad we don't have to wait, that we don't have to wait till we die. Love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. And that's more than just being nice. These words are, have deeper meanings. The kindness, generosity, faithfulness, and gentleness is coming up. Gentleness and self-control, the last one. So do y'all have any thoughts on this list?
It's kind of the opposite of the 7 deadly sins.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, they just, like the verse before. Let's see. Yeah, so choosing or having that option, how would we like to live eternity? This verses here, I'll call up Galatians. Let's see. Okay, Galatians 5:22. So that was right before. Okay, here we go. And that, what you said, 7 deadly sins. So the opposite of this, just a few verses before, starting in verse 19, works of the flesh, fornication, impurity, licentiousness, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, anger, quarrels, dissensions, factions, envy, drunkenness, carousing, and there's more, and things like these. So I guess, if people can think of it, we will.
It's more than 7.
Yeah, more than 7, but I guess the 7 trying to capture categories. But yeah, and things like these. Let's see. And then that flows into the fruit of the Spirit, which I think we'd rather have this.
You're talking about eternity.
Yes.
And that eternity time frame is different for each person, because I'm thinking, well, if it's today, it was yesterday as well.
Yeah.
And for our parents and grandparents, whatever, their eternity started, hundreds of years ago.
Right.
So it's like a big circle. It never
Never
there really is no start or end.
It just never ends. And
We've talked in Saturday men's group, we are in time, but God is outside of time. So it's like time doesn't mean anything to God.
And that makes me want to pull up that verse. You hear it at funerals, some, lo, in the twinkling of an eye. To God, time doesn't exist for God. So yeah. And yeah, and that is fascinating to think how it's, everyone, this continuous circle and thinking about consciousness, your parents, grandparents. And then like, us, when did we have our first memory? Our own awareness, we were alive versus, like there was a time we weren't here and now we are. And then where are we going? So we have eternity that's already ongoing, but continues as our faith assures us in the risen Jesus Christ. Let's see. And then, okay, fruits of the Spirit. And then to add, so we're going from this sense of God being, free, majestic, larger than all categories. And from there, we can go to 1 John, 1 John 4. Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Anthony, did you have a question?
Oh,
You
thank you.
raised your hand?
Well, can you guys hear me?
Yes. Hi, Anthony.
Okay. Hello.
Go
Testing,
ahead.
testing. Can you hear me? Okay. I just had a comment as you guys were talking about the love and the joy and the peace and the patience and all the different fruits of the Spirit.
Yes.
One of the things I was thinking about too, it's sometimes we think about things in the additive, like, how do we cultivate these things? But I think it's also interesting to think about what they are not. What is not those things, so that we can arrive at a pure state. And one of the things I think is interesting is, when you look at time, you have memory, you have anticipation of the future, and you have anxiety, you have concern, worry, desire. And a lot of times those accumulate to sort of impurify us a little bit and to color things in a way that's not pure. That's not what God really wants us to experience and see. And so I think sometimes knowing what it is not helps you kind of get back to that which is actually within all the time, which is the pure love and gentleness and patience and peace and faithfulness. So I just thought that was an interesting thought that I had as you were speaking about that, Karl, because it's a great way to think about what God really intends us to do.
Mm-hmm. And to have those opposites in mind to help guide us.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. No, I appreciate that. Well, and there's even a sense in the biblical language, the word adultery, that has the sense of something that contaminates, something like a foreign substance or something introduced into something that was pure.
Yep.
So yeah. And that's why we have the community of faith that we've been baptized into to support each other, to help each other, recognize those opposites that creep in, and then we're trying to get to the pure that God is offering.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Karl, I
Yes.
have a thought about going back to the Yahweh.
Yes.
You have here only the consonants,
Mhm.
which is true since there are no vowels
Right.
written in the Hebrew language until the
Mhm.
Masoretic text in the 7th century AD.
I want to write it down. So let's do consonants only. Okay.
Consonants only. So therefore, when people are reading the name of God,
Did I
they
get it right?
don't know exactly how to pronounce them.
Right.
And they're very afraid also because of the second commandment to use God's name in vain.
Yes.
So oftentimes, actually, they would not even speak God's name, use only the radicals
Mhm.
and the consonants. And to that, they would put, but I think when they would speak it, they would put the vowels of Adonai, Lord.
Mhm.
And for many people who worked with Hebrew, they thought that the consonants of Yahweh and the vowels of Adonai were the true name of God, and they pronounced Jehovah.
Yes.
And Jehovah really is a name that should not exist. So, sorry, Jehovah.
Should I write it down or no?
No, like, sorry, Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
But anyhow,
I know.
just comment about God's name is so, so sacred.
Yes.
And if you speak it, and you should speak it in a way without the thought that would be appropriate for it, the honor and so on. And just more or less a throwaway name,
Mhm.
that would be a violation, so
A commitment.
they're much more careful than we are.
Yes.
People are using God all the time.
Yes.
Well, I can remember as a child, talking to my grandmother, you weren't allowed to say gosh, you weren't allowed to say golly,
Yeah.
because that was taking the Lord's name in vain.
Right.
Yes.
Couldn't say dang, couldn't say dang, you couldn't say.
Mhm. And I'm just thinking all the things I hear now all the time. No, and we have, and you know how it creeps in, things creep in, like Anthony was saying, things creep in. You know, like with our teenagers, that this eternal debate now, what is actually a cuss word and what isn't? And our standard is much higher, you know, and yeah.
Grandfather's favorite expression was God Dixie, and I don't know where that came from.
Mhm. See?
You know, he'd say
Yeah.
God Dixie at anything.
Mm-hmm. But just like you wouldn't even speak the name God out of reverence. And now what do we think? Okay, Jesus, you know, the Lord's Prayer, Abba, Aramaic. You know, some scholars will say it's like saying daddy or father, like addressing God as a parent. What do y'all think of that coming out of a tradition like don't even say the name? And now we're saying daddy or father.
Well, I think it's what you were saying,
Yeah.
the having the, big God and the
Mhm.
personal God, it's the difference between those two. So saying Abba is the personal God,
Yeah,
whereas that's the
you have to
big
remember
God.
there's the big God too. Yes.
There was a time in my life where I was near death in a hospital ICU unit, and I got a Bible verse that got stuck in my head, and I'm thinking about it
Okay.
right now. And it's the Bible verse from Romans 8, where Paul tries to explain that Jesus said there's nothing you can do to remove yourself from the love of God in Christ Jesus,
Right.
which implies to me that he is there because he wanted to be there, had nothing to do with us,
Okay.
except that he wanted to be there with us. And so that, and to explain that, we don't have to figure out who he is, we don't, because in that, there was a nurse in that ICU unit, her name was Samantha, but she preferred to be called Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember Sam being God to me at that point in time, because she was there making sure I didn't pull the breathing tube out and all the rest of the stuff that was keeping me alive.
Mm-hmm.
And to this very day, I remember that time and that experience where God was present in that room through the people that were there.
Mm-hmm.
And it resonates even today when you were going through this stuff,
Yeah.
that Paul, the people in Paul's time, were struggling with all the stuff we're talking here about it.
Right.
Hey, don't worry about it, because you can't fix it, because I'm the one that decides. I'm there with you somehow, through somebody, through whatever, but it's my decision, not yours.
Yeah. And it sounds just like this, I am who I am. I
Yeah,
will
that's
say
right.
what I will say. I will do what I will do. Yeah.
And there's nothing you can do to stop that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Politically, it seems as if we are in an era where we've narrowed down God to the very personal and specific.
Mm-hmm.
Not just to the individual person like ourselves or citizen, but to our individual country.
Right.
So we're really big on saying God bless America. Just
Right.
about every speech and everything is God bless America. We had an East German here who said, well, I hope God blesses America, but I also hope that God blesses my country. And
Right.
so there is this larger, and we have the hymn, beautiful Savior, Lord of the nations. So
Nations.
it's not just our nation. So we have this both and here. Yes, it's very specific. It is my God.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just my personal God, it's the God of
Mm-hmm.
creation. And this sometimes we get just a little bit too narrow on the word
Right.
God. I think the balance is getting lost.
Mhm.
Other thing is, you gotta say God. You don't dare say Allah or any other expression for God. Otherwise, you're talking about a false God.
Mhm.
Well, God is that's our language, that's English, what other people say.
Yeah,
They don't all say that. God, well, and God we trust, yeah, well, and here we have in Yahweh we trust.
yeah.
So when we get so insistent upon it has to be said in a certain way, it's
Mhm.
it's a little bit of a betrayal, I think, of the awesomeness
Right.
of the entity that God represents.
Mhm. And just to hear faith language 6 to 8,000 years ago, people were already talking about that which is larger. And who are we to try and pin it down? Yeah,
The more you try, the harder it becomes, you can't do it.
right.
Yeah.
Kind of like mercury, it spreads out more, it escapes.
I think, one experience I had, we were on a trip to Germany. We were in Martin Luther's church in Wittenberg. And they started the service with greeting in English.
Right.
Then it went into German. And they're doing all this stuff and they follow the same service,
Right.
but it's in German. It's like, whoa, it is bigger than just English,
Mhm.
they're not doing it right. They're not saying it the way I go, but they don't think we're doing it right.
Mhm.
I had an experience
Mhm.
in, what's the town where they have the fashion play?
Oh,
Over Amberjack.
yeah, there you go.
And I went to the Lutheran church there on Sunday morning, and there were people from all over the world there. So the pastor said, one thing we know in common is the Lord's Prayer. Everybody said your own language. That was one of the most expansive
Oh,
things in my mind.
Yeah.
Hear this,
Imagine.
the pacings and the phrasings worked out just fine, but it was like Pentecost.
yeah, I was thinking that. Oh, wow.
And it'd be good for us if we could all have experiences like that from time to time to keep us a little bit from
Yeah,
getting too narrow.
yeah, expansive versus narrow. Yeah. Well, we can, let's see, delve a bit into 1 John, because this is where the writer talks about God is love. And so, speaking of expansive, how large can love be? Larger than we think. So I'll read a little from 1 John, and this is where it says God is love, and we're going to talk about the different kinds of love. We'll touch on that. But so first we have in 1 John 4, starting with verse 7, Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God. Everyone who loves is born of God and knows God. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. God's love was revealed among us in this way. God sent his only Son into the world so that we might live through him. In this is love, not that we loved God, but that he loved us and sent his Son to be the atoning sacrifice for our sins. Beloved, since God loved us so much, we also ought to love one another. God is love, and we get to abide, I had abiding up here. God is love, and those who abide in love abide in God, and God abides in them. So love remaining with us. See, so different kinds of love. Just offhand, when you hear the word love, what do y'all think?
Family.
Okay, family. Yes.
Spouse.
Pardon?
Spouse.
Spouse, yes.
Well, we use it interchangeably with life.
Yes. And have y'all heard that saying? What do they say? They say, well, you don't have to like someone, but you do love them. You still have to love them.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of thing. So we're gonna get at that sense of love that's, so with a spouse, with family, that's a very deep love. And there's a fascinating quote, that I want to share with y'all from, When Bad Things Happen to Good People, about love, about how deep love goes. Because, you know, we have that, you know, there's also that, you know, greeting card sense of love, you know, very sentimental, kind of just like, I like you a lot. But then there's that deeper, well, we'll get to the deeper sense of love. Yeah. Now, in our Pi language, they were already talking about 8,000 years ago, that sense of love, to care, you know, a deep caring, like wanting the best for someone, you know, and without expecting anything in return. You're just happy for someone else, to care. Now they do, I think in the Pi language, they're touching on all the senses. Of course, you know, there's that romantic sense, to care, to desire. And then they added back in, they reinforced it to love. They come right back to love. And so that in Pi language, there's that sense of caring, desiring, loving, very similar to today. In Hebrew, we have hesed, loving kindness. So when you hear the word kind, is kind different than just being nice? What do you think? You know, there's a deeper sense. There's or a tolerance and acceptance with kindness. You know, it goes beyond just being superficially or politely nice.
I think that the kind is more active versus nice is just, you know, kind of passive.
Okay, yes. And so we're going to get into that sense, you know, there's that saying, love is a verb. We have to be reminded of that. Let's see. So loving kindness, hesed. So, and these are all words that are attributed to God. Loving, let's see. Loving kindness. Okay. And we're looking for that deeper sense. And then another type of love, agape. So very big in our faith. I'm going to use a different color. That sense, agape, a self-giving love. You know, we don't expect anything in return, a charitable love, wanting the best for another person, and we don't care what it means for us. We're just happy for them, or we want to help. We just want to help someone to help them. We don't expect anything in return. So another a deeper sense of love or self-giving. And of course, we can think of back to Philippians, Jesus pouring out his life for us, self-giving. Okay, so agape love. Let's see. Now there was let's see, how are we doing for time?
About 7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay, because I want to at least put a quote out there I think was very powerful, from When Bad Things Happen to Good People. And it's about love. Let's see. Okay, here we go. And so just a brief recap for those who might not have heard last week. So When Bad Things Happen to Good People, Jewish Rabbi Harold S. Kushner, his son was diagnosed at 3 years old with progeria, which is an advanced or premature aging disease. And he was told, he and his wife, I couldn't imagine the timing. The doctor walked in as their daughter had just been born. Doctor walks in and says, your son has progeria and will die by the time they're a preteen or barely a teenager. And their son did die at age 14 with the body of, his body had already aged to that of a 60-year-old by age 10. And so died at age 14. wrote this book. He wrote this book out of that grief to process it and how to deal with that grief. At the end, there very powerful definition of love. Love is not the admiration of perfection, but the acceptance of an imperfect person with all their imperfections, because loving and accepting them makes us better and stronger. So instead of just, we want that perfection in others, the same perfection that we all, yes, as humans, the same perfection that we all lack. But here is God remaining with us. God is going to keep doing what God wants to do, which is to reach out to us and to continuously offer us love so we can keep offering love to others and to the rest of the world. So, any final thoughts? Well, and there's so much of this that we're going to try and wrap. I know next week is our last class in this subject, and so we're going to try and wrap it all together. But
Karl,
the love of God. Yes.
hey, just reflecting on it, I think we've been talking about a little bit of a theme around, we're living in an era of individualism.
Yes.
Where it's about the individual and everybody's so sort of subgroups fragmented, the internet, social media, you can always find a group that's going to support your ideas.
Right.
And that's, sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. But I think just reflecting on this notion of your radical acceptance and love, I think it's a real good warning to heed for this individual nature and this individual time we're in, that while it's good to take care of yourself, to make sure that your needs are met, to make sure that those that are like you are people you collaborate with, you can enjoy time together, that it also is in many ways obscuring to the true picture of love, which is radical acceptance of others and seeing the commonality that we have together, and not so much so focused on the me, the sense of I that we have, because that, I think, can get in the way of being able to truly connect with others, because you're too self-centered about what's the condition that I need to make myself happy. What condition does my group need to satisfy that? Which is exactly the opposite of the unconditional aspects of the love that we're talking about here.
Yes. And that's the classic conception of sin, to be turned inward, to miss the mark, to miss God because we're so turned in on ourselves, curved inwards.
Yeah.
So Anthony, that helps a lot. Yeah, just to consider the boundless, how God is boundless.
For God so loved the world.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And yes.
When you're done, I have a cartoon that speaks to this. I just thought of it.
Are you able to pop it up?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think we're ready.
You ready?
Yeah. Yeah.
I get it.
This makes me think of song titles, All You Need Is Love.
Right.
And then when we're talking about imperfections, John Legend's song is I Love All Your Perfect Imperfections.
Yes. That's, yeah. That is so true. Yes.
Okay, it says, yeah, I guess it works better for New York than it does for Maine. He says, I love New York, and then he says, I love me. It's Maine.
Oh, Maine.
Yeah.
Oh, and it was me. I love it. That's a good way to end. Yeah. All right. So did our Zoom friends already log out?
I think we can.
No,
Okay.
it's still there.
Well, y'all, thank you for being with us via Zoom. Jim, hope you keep recovering and feeling better. And Anthony, good to see you.
I'm stopping the recording.
And y'all, thank you for your time. So, yeah, we'll see you next week. Oh, certainly. No, this is fun. My pleasure.